I welcome Yvonne to your episode of the podcast, which is about growing your tutoring business. Now, you're quite early on in your business world, I suppose. Is that right to say?
To an extent, in the enormity it's going to become, I've tutored for over 20 years,
Oh, okay.
on a low key basis. I sort of was quite full on before I had my children, and then obviously I had to take a step back, and then obviously we had COVID and things like that. But it's been sort of bubbling along for all those years, but I've never really considered having it as a occupation, full-time occupation, and only for about a couple of years, I think. Since then, I've sort of never felt it would generate enough money to be able to live off it, to be able to make
Okay.
it,
You mentioned the word enormity there. That sounds like you've set yourself a huge goal.
I have, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Tell us what's the bigger plan? Is there a dream ending or dream point where you go, do you know what, this would be it?
I think part of it would be, I mean, my dream for many years has been to was initially to have a school or something that was for dyslexic children, similar to a school that's used to be quite local to me, but closed down. And so that, but it was very difficult because in my area dyslexia is not as supported by the local authority as much as other difficulties. So my whole interest has always been around dyslexia. And so my ultimate goal would be to ensure that my tutoring company that I have would be recognized quite a lot for the dyslexia support it gives. And so within my tutoring business, not only will we be tutoring children with dyslexia and other children as well,
Yeah.
but also have on offer the ability to have formal assessments, and things like that as well, to offer that to the parents and also support and advice on how their children can be supported within school, and also any sort of formal sort of assessment processes they need to go through.
So are you able, is that something you're leaving with that skill? Can you formally assess at the moment?
Not at this point, but I'm starting a course in September, which will actually, by the end of the course, I will be able to formally assess and write reports for GCSE special requirements, as well as probably Kent test special requirements as well.
I wonder if you are going to start the course with somebody who I've just recorded a podcast with, because she's doing
Possibly.
exactly the same. Again, actually, it's similar. So tell us a little bit about your role at school at the moment.
So currently at the moment, my official title is Head of Learning Enhancement,
Okay.
which means is similar to a Senko, but I oversee children with learning difficulties as well as EAL and G&T children as well. And also I've covered looked after children. So
Okay.
my umbrella, my role is sort of all of those children under my umbrella. So it's I've been in this role for 10 years. And I've really enjoyed it. It's something I always wanted to do. It's something I spent many years trying to become a Senko, and I was always told you need to go away and get more experience and things like that. So I did lots of reading, lots of learning, and then when the school I was working in was taken over, I approached the new head, and he actually allowed me to take on the role. And I initially started off as head of learning enhancement and head of music until I grew the positions, or both aspects, departments up so much that I got to the point where I couldn't cope with both of them anymore, and I was happy to offload the music and keep the Senko side of things, keep that going.
So how long was you a classroom teacher before you sort of became the Senko and head of learning?
I've been teaching, uh let me think, 28 years. Qualified in 1996, 1995 I qualified. So I worked in a few schools before I got to the school I went to.
Okay. And so along the way there, like you were saying about like how long you've been tutoring for, that was almost like an instant thing. Was that just something you just naturally developed over time? Did you get asked? How did it all begin?
It began, I was in a very small school, and it was like a county school, and somebody mentioned that they tutored and they had this child that they couldn't take on, and I thought, oh, I quite like the idea of that. So I actually that was my first child, and I would say that was probably about 2001, something like that. So I went and worked with them, and then it gradually grew and grew just through word of mouth.
Mm.
I did. There was an agency I sort of joined not long after, a couple of years into it, where they were based up in, I think, Gillingham, and basically how they did it was they took the payment for the first two lessons, and then everything else was yours, and that worked quite well because they referred a few students to me that way.
Mm.
And then they sort of stopped after that, and not long after that, but um it's a lot of it has been through word of mouth initially.
Mm.
And then a couple of years ago, we're getting to the point, the pay, because I work in independent school, my pay isn't as I don't get paid as much as you do in the state school.
Yeah.
So money wasn't very brilliant, wasn't very good. So I sort of began to think about how I could generate this better and use it.
Mm.
So I joined a few agencies, tutoring agencies. And also it was about the time when the law was changing. There'd all been this big thing about how pay was going to be changed, how invoicing with parents and everything was changing. So I sort of thought we're better to stay with the agencies and watch to see how this developed, rather than try and deal with it all and get my head around it all myself.
Mm.
So I joined the agencies, which was okay, and I got quite a few bit of work from them. There was one particular big agency that I joined, and I got a little bit of private tuition, and then but I was seeing they had the NTP contract, but they weren't really offering it out to primary school. There wasn't a lot for primary school tutors. So then I decided I'd have a go at doing the GCSE maths and offering GCSE maths, and it just exploded. And then last term, I had 11 hours of work a week from them, from the NTP program,
Wow.
as well as all the other work I had. I mean, it was only a 12 block. It was
Yeah.
only 12 weeks, but it was great. And just
Mm.
suddenly, all of a sudden, because I've said yes, all right, I'll do GCSE maths, I'll do GCSE English as well.
Mm.
Suddenly, just the work is just coming.
Okay, wow, that's really interesting. That so obviously, the NTP stuff's been well spoken about, but it's like a lot of people go, well, how do you access it? So the NTP has generally worked with larger contracts going to agencies and kind of or bodies of people, and then they kind of recruit outwards in the way that you've said. I mean, some primary schools, they've got access to the money privately, which is why sometimes you'll hear like people go, I just went straight to the primary school. But in other cases, it's like the way you're describing it there, Yvonne. Because I know like some people be really interested in that, and the money's been secure for another year. Is that right? The NTP
That's
money?
right. Yeah. I mean, the idea was it was going to be there, I think, but reduced.
Mm.
But then they're actually going to keep it at what it was, I think, or that it's not going to reduce as much as it used to.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is exactly the same. Yeah, I think the lot in the budget, he was like, "Yeah, we're going to keep it the same." Although there might, I think there's it's reducing again, but over time, and probably from the point of view that we're getting to the stage where perhaps the catch up's been done. And I know we catch up is like that because we don't really know what they're catching up to, but just as a catch-all reference, which we all understand, it's the catch-up funding. That's pretty much what everyone calls it. It's that's really interesting because there's quite a lot I'd like to just unpick. So dyslexia is kind of at the heart of your purpose and reaching those children who struggle to get the support that they actually need in school.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're in Kent, like same as me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know whether you've probably had the training more than I did, because as I was leaving, this was the last bit of training I had through KCC in a school, was that they were no longer going to recognize dyslexia. And what they were saying was, it's not that they don't believe it exists.
No.
They were saying that we should just have dyslexic friendly classrooms.
Yeah.
Which is a lovely idealistic approach, but boots on the ground with the curriculum as packed as it is, it's actually quite unrealistic.
It is. And interestingly enough, because of being a Senko, obviously I've been involved in parents trying to apply for EHCPs for their children that are dyslexic. And working in an independent school, a lot of the parents are trying to fight for them to get the EHCP and to be in the independent school, which don't like to support. They like, obviously, the children to be in the state schools. And, the parents are like saying, well, there's the county are like saying, but the children can be supported in the school. And they're trying to put them into a school where there's 30 odd in the classroom, and there are like 8 TAs leaving at the end of the year. So how on earth can these children be supported with an EHCP, whatever the recommendations are on the EHCP, if they manage to get it, if they're lucky enough to get it, how can a state school can support that when they haven't got the TA support, there people there to do it?
I think like the key thing has always been for me is most of us as teachers are non-specialist. So we don't have specialist teachers, and you're quite lucky in your school if you've got somebody who has that knowledge to support dyslexic children. I mean, really support, like not just go, oh yeah, well, I went on this like 3-hour training by the local county. I'm talking about, that what you're talking about, Yvonne, like going back and actually studying for a year and really looking at the resources, or going, is it the British Dyslexic Foundation? Is it Association? Thank you. Yeah. Like there are courses run by them that are ongoing, an ongoing CPD to really make sure that you've got a high level of skills that you can pull out at the right time to help these children and families as well, because it is a family thing, right? Because it usually is a family thing. But also parents need support to support their child as well. Because it's not just we do this at school approach. If you really want to make sure the children get the benefit of everything, these kind of things need to be continued at home as well. How do you even solve that? Because we was talking about that, you really an insight into the world at school at the moment is that when a TA leaves, they're not getting replaced. When a teacher leaves, they're lucky to be replaced. So we're dwindling down the numbers in education because we can't afford to keep them all. And whereas we might go, well, we're just putting them in a group of 1 to 4, even in with a non-specialist, which can help because at least they've got a channel to ask questions. But if we can't do that now, and they're with non-specialist teachers, how do we solve that issue
in school? That's quite tricky, isn't it? I mean, obviously, there's also the research that has been made or been done about the fact there isn't enough training for NQTs either. When they're in university doing their teaching degrees, I think they have 1 lecture and that's it. And that's not enough of how to support these children. There's so many aspects. I mean, it's a spectrum as well, dyslexia. So it could be anything, like it could be phonological difficulties, it could be visual difficulties, there are many aspects to it as well. And also there's also co-occurrence as well, so they could have other difficulties to go with it. So the only way that you can actually deal with this is to put more training into schools and more training into CPDs in for the teachers, so that they can understand how they can make those reasonable adjustments.
So what we're doing now is, out loud, we've just created a company that could go around and deliver some training to schools, because I'm about 20% only joking about that. Because this is what I genuinely see is teachers in the caught in the headlights. They don't know what to do because no one's ever shown them. And we don't have time to even go, well, do you know what, I'm just gonna like watch a couple of YouTube videos or whatever, which is rubbish, by the way. You wouldn't do that with dyslexia. But we don't have time to do that, let alone go, right, I'm going to dedicate 40 hours this year on my CPD so I can get better at it. We don't even do that. You might, even if say, Yvonne, I say we, I mean you set up a company, and for that purpose, that you might get an inset day at a school, you might get a morning, and then you might go back in a year's time for a follow-up, or you might get a twilight session when everyone's tired and don't want to be there anyway. And so it's really hard then to make that impact, which is what I know that you're aiming for, that impact. So we don't want to do any of this just because of a weaker purpose. The bigger purpose is because we want to make an impact for these particular children. And one of the ways you're going to solve this problem is by working with these children directly. In an indirect way, could be through training opportunities with schools.
That sounds good, actually. I like that idea.
It does sound good. Just go for that.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, working in an independent school, we've done a lot of work on children, supporting children with needs. We're getting more and more parents coming to us wanting their children to come to the school because they're obviously not coping in the classrooms.
Yeah.
And and I've had children with this that are dyslexic that have come into the school, particularly around year 4, that are very reluctant writers. They don't want to write because they don't, they just have no
Yeah.
self-esteem there. And it's just been basically even helping them to realize actually it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to do a piece of writing that it's got full of spelling mistakes. It
Mm,
doesn't matter. The whole because they're so creative in their mind. And the key important thing is getting it down on that paper. Helping them get it down on that paper. We can deal with all the spelling errors and everything else later on. It's getting that creativity out. And one of the things we've been very fortunate with the school I work in, we the children from all the children from year 4 upwards have a Surface Go. And so the amount of assistive technology we've been able to put in place for these
mm,
children, just so that they can do things like speech to text, predictive text, spelling correction, spelling, predictive spelling. It's such an even change of color of background.
mm,
It's so liberating for them. And
mm,
you begin to see them slowly changing and being more enthusiastic in their self-esteem growing because actually I can do this and realize I can do this. I can get this all out and down on
mm,
paper. And it
mm,
doesn't matter about the errors I do because I've got things to help me.
mm.
And my teacher's not going to criticize my spelling.
Yeah.
Key thing.
Yeah. How important is it? And this is for everybody as well, not just children who are struggling, but everybody needs this. They need to know that when I put this amount of effort in, there's some, I'm going to say reward, but it's an
Mm.
intrinsic reward. I'm not talking about giving them a sticker, but it's like they can look back and go, "Oh my God, I've just done all of that work."
Yeah.
And it looks good. And like that feeling you get,
Yeah.
particularly for those children who have struggled for years and years, suddenly they're like, "Oh my God, I can do it."
Yeah.
And you're just giving them proof that they can, which is that's the beauty of everything for me. Like with all of education, I think that's incredible. I feel like you've got everything's like ready for you, like the foundations of your business and the reason why you're doing it is very strong.
Yeah.
Even I could probably do more superlatives than that. What's been the now you're, because we were talking just before we pressed record, you were saying that you're about to go part-time at school and you're going to put a little bit more time into the business. Just tell us about that transition. What's happening?
Basically, I went to my head back at Easter and I said offered to go asked to go part time. I said I'd been offered a franchise with one of the tutoring companies I'm working with. They've offered me a franchise on a very cheap rate, and I wanted to really take that up and really sort of explore that. And the bizarre thing is the actual tutoring company won't let me start the franchise until September. And I really wanted to get this going. I've got so many
Mm,
ideas. I want to get it now. So I've actually developed my own company in the meantime and got that going, got that and beginning to get that going.
mm,
And so the idea is the fact that obviously being in Kent, we still have the Kent test. And the advantage of my role in school is for one of the advantages of my role in school is the fact that I not only apply my role, I will apply for the special arrangements for children, but also I'm there on the day of the administration of the test, so I can get to see the papers because, as you know, we're not allowed to keep the papers or see the papers afterwards. So I get to see the papers and see what sort of questions they've used that year, what they've left out, what they've put in. So that felt that having that experience from the school would benefit my tutoring business as part of my offer of the 11 plus,
mm,
I've got that experience sort of thing. But also the fact of staying in the role of Senko, it helps me keep up to date with all the changes of what's going on in the county, because they're obviously going through quite a development at the moment, because obviously because they have been told by government to clean their act up, and basically they're in special measures with the government. They're having to the processes and applications for HCPs and how they work and what sort of children get the HCPs being part of in the Synco role helps me see how that's developing, so I can then advise parents outside, and those parents come to me for tutoring. I can then sort of say to them, well, this is how it's got to work, this is what's got to happen, this
Mm,
is how, whether you and be able to tell them whether their child would be able to qualify for anything like that as well.
mm.
So my
That's really
role is
interesting. Mm,
teaching. My role in school will benefit me still,
mm,
and that's why I've kept it as part-time rather than completely leave the school and to focus on the tutoring. And initially I was thinking, well, I wouldn't have time, but as it grows, there's obviously that ability to employ people to work. So I haven't got to take on all of that. I've got to be able to sort of hand some of
mm.
these jobs over to other people, which is going to be very interesting because I'm not used to doing that.
Yeah.
But it'd be fine, I can make it grow that way, and it hasn't got to be all about me doing it. There'll be other people involved.
I think that's a really sensible mindset to bring in. Like when you know that you're carrying on with your job, but also there's something else that can grow. First of all, it just means nothing can hold you back. But
Yeah.
I want to pick your brains a little bit about this, because I'm at a similar stage, and I wonder if we align on this. Like, what's your biggest worry about employing somebody?
That they are not at the standard you would want them to be, and they wouldn't deliver the way that you want them to be,
Yeah.
that you would want them to. That's
Yeah.
especially if you don't know them, and I had a actually a conversation with somebody that, because I've obviously started advertising some of the community groups, and somebody came to me and said, are you looking for a tutor? And I sort of pursued it, and I had a conversation with her, and I sort of sat there thinking, I'm not sure if I'm quite happy with you. There was something about it I wasn't quite happy with.
Mm,
So I mean, I've fortunately I've done the safe recruitment training at school, so I have that sort of little bit of knowledge behind me. But
okay.
what she was demanding was a bit too much for
Okay.
what I was comfortable with.
Mm. It's
But I'm not
such a
sure. Sorry,
tricky.
I'm not sure if that was just me or if there was something.
I, I think they're all viable concerns. I mean, they are similar to the concerns to what I have. The first thing is like delivery, the face-to-face stuff, whether it's face-to-face or online, but the actual delivery of a session. Are they going to deliver the same level, like you said, or what you would consider a typical lesson? At least like the minimum standard is often what I kind of go to.
Mm.
And I like to think I go over and above, like, because it's my business, right? And it's the children's life. So I'm always like thinking, how else could I make this better? I wonder if they're going to be in the same mindset. But I
Yeah.
also know that through the last few years of, sort of, I suppose, leading up to this point, trying to learn more about leadership, it's like no one's going to be the same as you. So it almost needs to be what they are. So you have to kind of or not accept that below a minimum standard, but
Mm.
allow them to do it in the way that would serve them and then the clients you find for them in the best way.
Yeah.
But because I haven't done it yet, and I'm in that stage right now where I've had conversations with people, and I've had the same things as you, where sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. There's something I don't know what it is, but I'm not certain. I'm not 100%. And then
Mm.
I've got about 3 that I've spoken to, and I've gone, wow, if I can get you on board, I'm excited. And
Yeah.
that's the only thing I can say, like from a gut feeling. I spoke to Sharon Corley about it because I was like, look, I'm about to interview these people. I've done interviews before, but in retail, right? When I was 20.
Yeah.
Can you put stuff on a shelf? Can you follow really basic instructions in terms of like the level that you need? Like I hadn't really done recruitment before. And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't really know. I don't want to do tick sheet stuff. I actually just want to like get to know them. And then her advice was exactly that. Well, get a
Yeah.
gut feeling. Don't worry about all that other stuff. Like, is this somebody you can see yourself working with?
Mm.
And can you have they got the right personality to be in front of parents and children? Because that's essentially what they're going to be doing.
Absolutely. And
Forget
taking
yeah.
and the ability, I mean, I have been fortunate enough to be involved with recruitment because I'm obviously involved with the TA recruitment.
Mm,
And again, sometimes that you get that gut feeling that they're not right. And I think part of it is how much they're willing to take direction, whether they are willing to work with you and whether they're willing to be advised and um but be directed by you as to how it needs to be, and it can take criticism as well. I mean,
Mm.
constructive criticism on board.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another thing, because it's all about they're giving them the ability to grow. I mean, with my TAs, I've always given them ability to train and grow themselves and initiate their ideas, and I've tended to let them specialize in their own interests so they can then use their knowledge and their ability to go across the board. And I think part of it, I mean, from working in independent school, obviously it's all about parents and the clients in an independent school, because if the parents aren't happy with you, they'll just take their children away and they won't pay your fees. And I think a lot of it is all about customer care. It's about making sure that the parents are happy and listening to what the parents have to say. And okay, some of them aren't always reasonable what they say, but you work with them. You have to, you have to work with them, because otherwise they'll just walk away.
Mm.
And it's all about, the main thing about the industry is about customer care and
Mm.
making sure that the customer is happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. 100% agree with that. We should all take that down. Like I one of the first business things I did at the start, very start of my business, went to a business conference, and there was a guy there who run several multi-million pound businesses, and he was like, when you look at some of the biggest brands in the world, it's all centered around happiness.
Mhm.
Like McDonald's, Happy Meal. If you look at Amazon, it's
Yeah.
got the smiley face and their logo. And so,
Yeah.
like, people put happiness at the center of everything. You actually can't go wrong if you do that. So, is
No.
there a line then? So, on the flip side of this, is there a line of how far? Let's take the word customer away. Let's say parent. Is there a line where parents can cross over and you go, actually, this isn't about care anymore. You're just, for want of a better word, taking the piss a little bit.
I think, I mean, from a school perspective, I find it very hard to work with, and I would be quite happy to push away the parents that don't work with you, that don't take your advice, don't listen to you, and go against what you advise them to do. I mean, I have pulled in when it's come to children with SEN. I listen to professionals. I work with the professionals. I bring their information to the parent and
Mm,
say, this is what they're suggesting. Let's follow this through and let's work together and work with these professionals. And then I've had parents that have gone against what I've said. And I
mm,
can't work with people like that. If they're not prepared to work with me, I can't
mm.
work with them.
Well, do you think that because your world within your independent school would be different to the state school? And I've got a family in my head right now, someone I've been supporting most of the year. Their child is ready for a diagnosis of something. The parents are not.
No.
And so there's a real friction between the two. And what you've just said has happened, and not by me, but I've just been part of that little puzzle. The Senko at the school have put all the professionals around a table and said, look, this is what we've done. We've done all the assessments. This is what we think we need to be doing next. And these are like, we're talking educational psychologists and speech
Mhm.
therapists and the Senko themselves and other people. And still there's oh no, we just think this. It's like, well, in the school setting where it's a mainstream school, there's not much more that you can do. But in your world and your experience, of because they're paying to attend your
Yeah.
school, do you think that experience really sets you up in or that experience, you can kind of lift it up and bring it to your tutoring business? Is that something that's going to support you?
I mean, we've had parents we've had children in our school where, especially when they come through nursery, because we've had to get to the point where we've said to parents, we're not the right school for your child. Your
Yeah.
child needs more than what we can offer. And we worked on the understanding that as long as we've put in as much reasonable adjustment as we are capable of doing, and we have evidence of doing that, then we have the right to turn around and say, actually, we
You've
are
got
not the
nothing
right
left.
place for this. Parents have to go on that journey of acceptance, and that's quite hard for parents to do, especially even so, more so around the autism side. Still, a lot of the parents really struggle to accept that diagnosis and that
Mm,
difficulty, and they won't see it, and and they find it very hard. And as part of your role is you've got to help them work through that journey carefully, and you take it and you support them through that journey of coming to that realization of it. And we work on the basis it's not about the label, it's about finding what the barrier is that's causing their difficulties at school of learning. Once we know what that is by using a professional to diagnose, we can then address those barriers and we can help that child move on with their learning. And that's how we approach it, as it being addressing the barriers that they're facing rather than it being a label.
So I'm going to make a confession. Like we've that the word label now is something I've completely changed my mind on, because I used to have that in my head, like, oh, we're just labeling these children. Like my youngest daughter has really struggled with the transition into secondary school, and it's kind of highlighted a lot of stuff. She's just masking a lot, and actually she's probably somewhere on the spectrum. Whether we go for a diagnosis or not is kind of near or there. It's just about recognizing that there are some barriers. Mm-hmm. And before, at primary school, I'd have been like, look, if we do this now, it's just about labels. But do you know what happens? Like, we label these children anyway. Yeah. They get labeled. They just get negative labels.
That is the sad thing with a lot of schools. But from my perspective, especially going through transition, especially with children on autism that have anxiety difficulties, I mean, my is more about once they hit hormones, it exemplifies, and it's their mental health that's the key here. I mean, my son has undiagnosed autism. In fact, actually, hopefully we're going to get him diagnosed this year, because he's due to start year 10 in September. And he went through such a dark period when his hormones started kicking in. You know, it was quite worrying about some of the things, you know, he was saying. And that was part of that was hormones, and part of that was that autism side of things. And we had to do a lot of work and exploration with him. And the school he goes to is fantastic. They were really supportive and helped us, even though he didn't have that label.
Yeah.
But you could see that those barriers were there. And it's about addressing, for example, if they have the anxiety, we need to address the issues that are causing that anxiety, and sort of like preempting them and supporting them through it. But we can't do that if we don't have those professional diagnostics there, because we could be sort of addressing it from the wrong angle.
Yeah, I get it. And actually, there's the experts out there that can do that, right? Yeah. That's what they're there for. That's
absolutely.
And that's when you all sat around the table with one another. And that's where the question come from. I'm just wondering if, like, it's like a different perspective on that conversation, because in state schools, there's like a line where you go, well, we can't do anything else, but we just now got to start coping. And we take on board like what the professionals would tell us as a school, but like as a parent, they're still going to bring their children in. I mean, you wouldn't be advised to say to the child or the parent that we can't support you anymore. No. Because you don't really have that choice. So having those conversations is something that is a skill that you could probably lift and put into your own tuition business when those kind of difficult conversations start to arise, because they become a little bit more natural. Perhaps you're working with someone for so long and they're not, you know, using the techniques that you're showing them. It's like, where's the line again? Do you then say, do you know what, I don't think we can continue? Or you say, do you know what, if you're not going to follow through with these things, there's the tuition isn't going to be impactful. And
that's the hard part, because when it's child with SEN, if you do the turnaround and I know it's very difficult and you're battling against parents, but for me, if I turn around and said to a parent, well, actually, I can't support the child anymore because you're not putting that on board, I feel I would be failing the child, because it's not the child's fault, it's the adults around. And a lot of it has got to be about trying to educate the adults around them, and on how they can help that child and how they can support that child.
So it would flip around to supporting the parents. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it's about helping. It's really being there for that child and helping them, because I couldn't walk away from a child in that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and I totally get that. I feel that a lot. And actually, I feel that particularly over the last couple of years when children have worked. I mean, I don't work with a lot of SEN children now. I save some time every week where I can do one-to-ones. And this year there's been maybe just one really, but mostly really supportive parents. They're all supportive. But there's a little bit of resistance in some cases when it's Kent test. Most of it's still Kent test, even though some of them, and I'm really honest, I go, look, you know what we really need to be focusing on is English or the reading and the writing. What we really need to be focusing on is the math. So let's just park the verbal and non-verbal part of the Kent test to 11 plus, because this is what's really going to support this child over the year. And having those conversations have been quite difficult over COVID, like with those particular, or not over COVID, I suppose what's been left behind by the COVID times and lockdowns. And that's been harder, I found. Like, the conversations have been fine, but the I suppose what's left after the conversation of there's been resistance. It's like, oh no, we still want to carry on, Mr. C. And I'm like, okay, yeah, and I want to carry on too, but I need to be honest about the Kent test aspect of this. And that is, let's make sure your child is confident in English and maths, because that's lifelong skills. That's going to set them up for a better year 6 and set them up for a better year 7. And the longer term aspect is what I'm really focused on. Like, it should be a vehicle for other stuff. And yeah, getting everybody to buy in.
In that perspective, what I normally do is I usually do the verbal and the non-verbal as a warm-up exercise. So they're still getting that little bit of input, and you can still say you're covering it, but actually spend most of the lesson on the English and math aspect, and work it that way.
Yeah.
But the sad part is it's the parent's choice as to whether the child takes that exam. And the frustrating part again for me is watching these children working constantly through the summer, which the parents are putting them in. And then I know, and even though we have constantly told the parents it's not the right place for the child, the grammar school will not be the right place for the child. You need to consider, but the parents won't listen. They'll still go through with it, and they'll still put those children through under that strain. And there's not what you can do about it. The only thing you can do is put in the special arrangements that they need and just support them through, and make the parent very aware that on the day, if you really don't feel the child can cope with it, they don't have to take the test. But it's sad seeing some of these children that clearly won't pass, and you tell the parents for many times that they're not, that they'd be better off at a comprehensive school, non-selective school, but they still don't listen.
I'll tell you what I found, Yvonne, over the last year, because I've been doing NTP stuff in a local school, and they offered me a little space to do some tutoring, and I've really enjoyed it, but it's not been quite as successful as I wanted, and so I'm not going to do it next year. But now people know that I'm not going to be around as much. I'm still going to do some NTP, but I've just wound down to 1 day rather than 2. And people have felt like now they know they're not going to see me as much. They've been really telling me what they think about my Kent test stuff. And it's interesting because people have a really warped view of it. They think, it's a bit, and it is a business. It's there to make a profit, but ultimately I want to support children. And my ethos is always about support first, and teacher first, tutor second. And if a child's in front of me and I can see they're not going to pass, or it's going to be a struggle for them, because I have seen children pass when I've gone, I don't know how they've done it. That genuinely they've just knocked it out of the park on the day, or got lucky with a few guesses maybe. That's the reality of it. Like, I'm so honest with people, and I say, look, do you know what, you're really struggling with their reading. The reading's actually, or sometimes the reading's at a good level, but they're not reading fast enough, because it's not just about knowledge, it's about pace and making decisions, being a good decision maker, all those things. But I can really see that there's potential there if you're still willing to invest. We're still able to make this difference, and we still use that test as the kind of end destination, as the vehicle, but ultimately we want to make them a more confident learner. And if parents buy into that, then I'm happy. If not, I'm also happy, because they're doing the thing that they feel's right, but they're doing it with the knowledge that they're doing it for the right reason. And I think that's really important. But I've had particularly this week, weird conversations about it, because there's a few children who are attending who aren't going to pass, but and they know they're going to struggle. Parents know they're going to struggle. But between us, we've all got on board with why we're doing it and the reasons we're doing it. And the progress they've made is huge. And it's probably, the test is going to come 6 months too soon for them, but there's not a lot we can do about that. But I know they're going to have a much, much, much better year 6 than what they would have done. And I think we can all sleep easy with that. Like, that's the whole point why we go into teaching in the first place, is to help people progress and move on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. Anyway, that leads me to a question, right? Because it's about the outside influence of what people think. When you sort of I think you've gone through this already, Yvonne, because you've been doing it for such a long time. So this probably isn't so prevalent for you, because you've been tutoring for a little while now. But lots of people, and I thought more, but lots of people will say, oh, do you know what? I was telling people that I'm becoming a tutor, and they were really negative about it. I was saying, oh no, why are you leaving teaching? Because it's, it's a solid job. You really love it. And it's, you do it because you're there for the children, and try and sort of draw them back in. I wouldn't say through 100% guilt trip, but perhaps they're genuinely worried about the future for this person who's going to kind of risk it all by going self-employed. Is that something that you ever experienced?
I haven't had sort of generally I think the only sort of concern that was raised was more actually to do with, I suppose, my husband. That is a case of, well, how we're going to afford it, how we're going to manage it. So and that's been sort of conversations I've had in the past. So this time, now that I'm actually going through it, I haven't completely told him. I'm sort of I'm just waiting to build the I'm going to wait I'm going to wait until I build the clients and say, well, actually I'm going part-time, but I'm getting this much money instead, and do it that way. I think that will work better with him.
I'm nervous for you, Yvonne.
I think I've got to, I mean we've been married 28 years, something like that. So I know how to work him, the sort of thing. But it's very much a case, it will be very much a case of, if he knows that it's not going to affect our money and our income, he'll go with it, and I know he will.
Cool.
So, good. And I've begun to drip feed already, so he I think he sort of knows, but we haven't had that actual conversation. And I think that will just be how it works with us, sort of thing.
So that's been really it. So that it's kind of a supportive environment, right? You've got someone to sound off ideas with, and it's not going to come back with, oh, why are you doing that? That kind of negative approach. That's really lovely.
And strangely enough, when I've sort of said about it at school, half the teachers have turned around to me and said, do you need any help? Do you need anyone to work?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I think,
it was really positive. I put a post in the larger group beginning of this week or end of last week, I can't remember, saying about like that particular question, and it got quite a lot of responses, and I would say over 80% of them are positive. And then a few people similar to me, just had a few people in the background going, oh, but aren't you going to miss it? Aren't you going to miss this part of the job or that part of the job? And there's so much stuff that I wasn't going to miss, that it didn't matter with the other stuff that I was going to miss. And most of the things that I do miss from teaching, I get in here anyway. I think from the tutoring. So
I think part of the conversations I've had, though, is because obviously before I made sort of it known that I was going to be doing this, I'd actually had the chance to talk to listen to yours and Sharon's conversation. And so my main part of my conversation is, well, I've got inspiration from this lady who's gone from £30 in her pocket to having a business that now turns over 7-figure amounts.
Exactly. Yes.
And I said, so it is there. And I think also because of being a full-time teacher, and it was just like a part-time job, I didn't charge very much. So and so it never looked as if it would generate a lot of money. But because now I've put my prices up a little, not a huge amount, but a little bit more reasonable. And even in the last month, next month, I will be equaling what I get paid at school full time from just a month's worth of tutoring.
And how many hours is that?
I think I worked at about 20 hours so far, so I've still got space.
It's crazy, isn't it, really?
Yeah. It is, and I've still got space for more. I can't get groups going though. I'm really struggling to get my groups going.
I think like the group thing's been quite a big thing in the course this year. Like everybody's asking about the groups and switching to that, and we cover that a little bit. I mean, a lot of it we're going to look at like the marketing and the messaging. A lot of it's just being brave and saying no to one-to-ones and allowing the groups to grow. But I think in your case, because Kent Testoff, you could just do groups. Because you just say no to one-to-ones. In most cases, it just works a whole lot better in small groups. I know there's some where I'm based in Canterbury, there's people who do groups of between 10 to 15. That's a bit too much for me. I quite like my groups to be between 4 and 6. And I think that's manageable. And if I've got 6 in, I'd actually get another adult in. I have a couple of A-level students who I've known for a while. They come and support now, and that makes such a difference because everybody's getting the value they need, and they added a little bit of a different energy into the room anyway, because they both went to grammar school, so they're able to ask questions about the grammar school and their journey, and I quite like that. But I think in general, it's all about your messaging with groups. It's just making sure people understand that they're valuable, and then your one-to-one price can go up, and so your value proposition for your groups is almost like a no-brainer.
I mean, I've advertised for the summer, some groups for the summer, which is basically a span of anything from help with phonics, sort of like phonics. I've sort of called it phonics is fun, maths is fun, from sort of like reception into year one, right up to GCSEs. And I've had no inquiries about it at all. So I'm trying now to try and do one particular one at a time.
Yeah, good
See
idea.
if that works. And see if I can get adverts out. So I thought maybe I'll try the more key stage one generalized ones now rather than and see if that works. But I'm not sure if it's might be something to do with the area I'm in as well. So
and where are you going to do your tutoring, Yvonne? Where do you do it? Do you do it online?
I have set up ready. It's like the parish, it's like the church parish house, council house, office house. They have a house opposite the church, and they've offered me the chance to go and use their room, and it's a bit like a converted house. It's
nice.
Sort of used. So that's all set up, and they're even advertising everything for me as well. So
amazing.
She's been really good, but
it's really good.
Not getting anywhere with the Intrinsic. So
well, yeah, I mean, still quite soon. I'll say it's still quite soon for summer. I mean, I know summer's around the corner, but like this, sometimes these things just need a little bit more lead time. You know, get them out there a little bit earlier and see how it goes. I mean, I'm sure you'll get some over the summer because it will just people will just start to naturally look. I've found something similar in mine actually. Even with my current clients, should be continuing over the summer, but they've been really slow to book to the point where this is the last full week of tutoring, and I'm like the calendars out there. Are you going to book? Is this something you're looking at? Oh yeah, we'll definitely get to that. We definitely want to do something over the summer. I'm like, well, the one-to-one's gone. I don't often do one-to-ones, which is why they've gone really fast. So it just leaves groups left. That's all there is.
Yeah.
And there's still a little bit of reluctance. So I do get the group thing, but generally speaking, I'll just say no to one-to-one. So there is no other choice. That's the way that I did it. The message is that like people will want your tuition because it's you, Yvonne.
Yeah.
And they will always want it because it's you. It's not the one-to-one that they're buying, it's you. And so when they realize there's like, no other option, or the option is, well, I could either pay Yvonne £150 an hour for one-to-one or £25 to have her to have my child there for a small group. It's a no-brainer. I'm not saying you charge £150 an hour.
No, I know. I think the difficulty is the one-to-ones that I've picked up, especially over the summer, have been children that have struggled, that have SEN, and that's the thing, is that you can't do them for groups.
The target audience, isn't it? It's like, exactly. I feel the same like that. So when people move to there was one classic one a couple of weeks ago, and she phoned and said, I want a group for my little lad. I was like, oh, tell me about him. What's going on? You know, is he struggling at school? She went, oh no, he's really bright. He's one of the youngest in the year, but he's like great at depth. I was like, oh, he doesn't need one-to-one.
No.
I was like, but just let me tell you why though, Mr. C. I was like, yeah, okay. I was like, but I don't offer one-to-one. My one-to-ones, I have about 2 hours a week, and that's for the children who really struggle. You know, they really need curriculum catch-up work, or there's another like learning reason why they couldn't cope in a group.
No,
but your child's going to go to a top grammar school in Canterbury, and being large groups of other children, being in a group is going to be fine for him, particularly a small group of between 4 to 6.
Yeah,
and he'll learn faster as well. That's what the research says. There's nothing else to say. Like if they still don't want it by then there's a lot. And I was saying to them, there are so many tutors in Canterbury that would help you out one-to-one. It's just not me.
No.
And she put into a group. It's just that those are the sorts of conversations, and sometimes it's bravery, sometimes it's message, like the message that you put out there and the way you do it. And the other thing is, and I was quite bad about this with her because it went on for so long. I was like, look, it works better. It's easier for them because it's not so intense, particularly for children who can cope with it. And I can't be in a building which charges me this amount of money and do one-to-ones at £30 an hour. I couldn't do it. Financially, it is not viable. Yeah. But that's not your problem. That's mine. This is the business which I'm running, and it's up to you whether you want to accept it or not. With her, I was like super honest in the end because she wouldn't let it go. Anyway, right, Yvonne, I've got one final question for you.
Okay.
Because it's been an amazing conversation. Actually, I know we've spoken about many subjects. Tuition has been like probably about 20% of what we've spoken about, and I love that. With your worldly knowledge of the tuition, because you've been doing it for so long, and your role as a Senko, and particularly in an independent school where you're managing clients and customers in a different way to what we were doing mainstream,
Mhm.
What advice would you give to somebody new to business, somebody new to that world, so someone who's a teacher, I know it's only ever been a teacher, what advice would you give to them coming out into the business world?
I think part of it, you've got to decide what you want from it, and you've got to give and put in as much as you want out of it. So if you want to make it big, you've got to put the work in. You have got to be proactive. You've got to think continually outside the box about how you can make this bigger, how you can make this grow, and be willing to accept criticism and adjust your thinking and be prepared to adapt, I think, to make it work.
Okay, so sort of be clear about where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like rolling with the punches a little bit, isn't it? Making
Yeah.
sure that you can cope with the changes and difficulties that come your way, because growth in business is very strange and strange decisions have to be made. It's the only thing I could really say about it, really, sometimes. But that's good. I like the idea of accepting criticism. Would you include self-criticism in that?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think as a teacher, I mean, certainly from when I trained many moons ago, one of the things we were always being taught was to be reflective. We always had to be taught to be reflective. And I think that's one of the key things is you have to be reflective and you have to accept, okay, this didn't go so well. So what do I need to do next time to change this?
Yeah.
Or this isn't working. What do I do to change this? And I think part of it is you have to be solution based. You have to think through, okay, how am I going to change this? What am I going to do to make this better? What other angle do I need to come from with this? And be very, very think through to find a way forward. I think sometimes
I feel like that's kind of been an underlying theme throughout. Like you haven't actually said it in that way before, but all the way through it's been very much about finding the solution, sitting down and going, look, here's the problem, and we can talk about the problem, but actually how are we going to get through it and find the way out, or the way towards where we want to go. And that's been a theme all the way through.
And not to be afraid to try things and then turn around and say, well, actually that didn't work, but I've tried it. And that, and prove that it doesn't work in a way, rather than saying, oh, I don't think that will work, and not do anything. It's not going to work.
Yeah, that's an entrepreneurial thought, right? That's how entrepreneurs should be thinking all the time. Like it's like almost like it's the what if, but it's like the what if it works rather than the negatives. That's really interesting. Thank you, Yvonne. It's been an absolute pleasure to chew the fat of all things about education, schools, Senkos, and how I suppose it's quite a unique position in that not many people would have been coming from an independent school and had that, almost seeing families as paying clients, because that's what they are, and making sure that there is that value there all the time. And I think using that in your business is going to be a huge benefit.
Part of that, a lot of that came from COVID, because during lockdown we had to keep working. We had to produce lessons. We were producing 3 lessons a day, as well as doing tutorials and so, sort of taps in with children. And if the children weren't there, we wanted to make sure know why. And because of that, because we provided that service, the parents stayed, because we knew that if we didn't provide that service, the parents would leave, and that's our jobs on the line. And I think COVID taught us an awful lot about customer care and customer service within the independent sector, because we needed to survive basically and have our jobs there when we came out of lockdown.
I think that's going to stand you in really good stead when you start going towards your enormity of the next business, is how you put it, which I think is amazing. What a way to start with the word enormity, because that there's that way to do that. And also, if you need help with the other business, Yvonne, let me know, because I want to get on board with that early doors and start going around to schools and helping them start supporting their parents and children a bit better. Yvonne, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope to do this again soon.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And I hope everybody listening's got quite a lot from it, because I know I've got a whole page of notes that I need to go and read through now.
Good.
It's been a pleasure, Yvonne. Thanks very much.
Right, thank you.
Bye-bye.